Today on Voice Breakdown, an abomination. A creature so vile, so foul, so flawed.
And also cute and fluffy.
That's right, today we are talking about experiment 626, also known as Stitch. Remember, all we need to do is figure out 6 components and we can sound exactly like Stitch. Let's break this voice down. Component number 1, the vocal cords. Stitch's voice might seem very high-pitched, but this is actually a bit of an illusion. While he certainly has a great deal of variety in his pitch because of the many different sounds that he makes, his typical speaking voice is actually just slightly higher than normal. Ohana means family. The bright quality in his voice that makes it seem like it's higher pitch is actually caused by some of the other components that we'll talk about later. His vocal cords do sometimes stretch into that head voice falsetto area, however, when he laughs. Component number 2, the larynx. As we noted earlier, Stitch has a very bright quality to his voice. This is partly accomplished by raising the larynx. If we take that slightly higher pitched voice from before, Ohana means family, and combine it with that raised larynx, Ohana means family, we are one step closer to doing Stitch's voice. Component number 3, the tongue. The real secret to creating Stitch's voice lies in the tongue. In previous videos, we've talked about tongue clench. Clench. And add in the tongue clench, the tongue needs to clench some of that tongue clench. We need to really clench or flex that tongue to create Stitch's voice. Stitch's voice is also unique in that not only do we need to clench the tongue, we also need to raise that back of the tongue up and forward. When we do so, it creates a really tiny space for the sound to move around and vibrate. That small space causes the voice to sound very bright, tiny, and gives that illusion of being high-pitched.
It's not really high-pitched.
It helps to plant the sides of the tongue against the top back molars so that you're really able to pull the tongue forward and upward, creating that tiny space.
Tiny, tiny sound.
The placement of the tongue also enables us to create some of those unique sounds that Stitch produces. As we clench the tongue and move it around, we can create small spaces of air between the tongue and other body parts such as the soft palate and the hard palate. Try moving your clenched tongue more forward, backwards, upward, and downward and see the variety of sounds that you can produce. One specific sound that Stitch makes on occasion is the uvular trill. The uvula is the punching bag that hangs down from your soft palate in the back of your throat. If we bring the back of the tongue high enough so that it's close to the uvula and we blow air between those two structures, it'll cause the uvula to vibrate, making sound. We can also choose to turn on the voice and vibrate the vocal cords at the same time that we vibrate the uvula. This, combined with all of those other components of Stitch's voice, will create that Stitch growl. If we take that slightly raised pitch, Ohana means family, combine it with that higher larynx, Ohana means family, and then combine it with that tongue clench,
Ohana means family.
it's starting to really sound like Stitch. Component number 4, the soft palate. As we've discussed in the past, the soft palate acts as a trap door or a gateway between the mouth and the nose. Stitch will vary how much sound goes into his nasal cavity. As you are trying to do his voice, experiment with putting more or less sound into the nose until you get a version of Stitch that you like. Component number 5, articulation. While there are no specific speech sounds that Stitch produces differently, all of his speech sounds sound a bit strange because of all of the other components we previously mentioned. Once you make the necessary changes to the vocal cords, the larynx, the tongue, and the soft palate, his strange style of articulation will happen naturally. One thing to note, however, is that it might be a bit difficult for you to articulate clearly while having all these components manipulated the way they are. It's going to require some practice to enable you to have full control over the tongue and articulate specific speech sounds while still having the back of the tongue clenched. It's helpful to over-articulate speech sounds while practicing. Component number 6, prosody. As we know, Stitch can be a bit wild and mischievous.
Blue punch, brother!
As a result, his prosody and inflection can be all over the place at times, but there is no specific pattern that he always follows. As you might expect, speed up, raise your pitch, and get louder the more excited he gets, and do the reverse of those things the calmer that he gets. Let's recap.
Component number 1.
The vocal cords. We want to have just a slightly raised pitch.
Component number 2.
The larynx. We want to raise our larynx.
Component number 3.
The tongue. We need to have that tongue clench and pull the back of the tongue upward and forward. This is also going to enable us to produce some of those unique sounds that Stitch makes.
Component number 4.
The soft palate. Stitch's nasal resonance varies, so you can feel free to experiment with this component until you get the version of Stitch that you like.
Component number 5.
Articulation. By doing the previous 4 components, Stitch's articulation will happen naturally.
And component number 6.
Prosody. Stitch's prosody is all over the place, so feel free to have fun with this component and manipulate it as you see fit.
Thank you for watching New York Speech Coaching's Voice Breakdown episode number 6, the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices. See you next time! Tiny, tiny sound.